Welcome. I'm Carol Wells, the founder and executive director of the Center for the Study of Political Graphics. A few fans here. A few hands here. What?
And PBS Star.
Oh,
yeah. She's referring to a series of Artbound that focused on 5 Los Angeles collectors and their collecting. And they called it Monomania, but then off camera, somebody called it Monomaniacs, and that got broadcast over. And if they keep replaying it, so you can, or you can go on our website and see it if you want, it's on there. I'm very pleased to co-host the Center for the Study of Political Graphics, co-hosting this with the UCLA Chicano Studies Center. The debut, the book signing of an incredible woman, Shifra Goldman, whom many of his here, how many here actually knew her? Yeah, she was a force to be reckoned with, and her book just edited by Charlene Villaseñor Black, and introduction by Chon, Noriega. We will hear from all of them in a few minutes. But I want to tell you a little bit about the center and a little bit about how I knew Shifra and her connection with the center. The center is 26 years old. We grew out of the Central America Solidarity Movement. The posters that were coming out of that struggle to teach what that struggle was about was inspired me to start collecting posters, because if the posters can teach people in Nicaragua, they sure can teach people in the United States. And we now have over 85,000 posters from all over the world, dating back to the 19th century and as recently as a week ago. So we're constantly getting posters. We get between 1,000 and 5,000 a year donated from all over. And what we do with them is it's a research resource for people from all over the world. Last week we had a curator from Colombia, a musician from Paris. We've had, that was just last week. And we have constantly getting researchers, curators from all over the world, and students from all over the United States. In addition to having, because the reason it's such an important resource, that we have so many posters from many different issues, when people want to do an objective history, you're not going to get it from looking at the inventory of the New York Times or the LA Times. They don't cover the counterculture. They don't cover the anti-war movement in the anti-war movement's own words. And that's what the posters do. So if people are doing an objective history, they really have to look at the primary historical documents that came out of those movements, and we have them. We have posters from the Oaxaca 2006 uprising. We have posters from the Rodney King uprising in LA in 1992. These are just, we have Paris 68. So we have a whole lot of posters about a whole lot of issues. The other thing that we do is that we do traveling theme exhibits that go all over the world. The most recent, we had one up for 2 months downtown LA at Mercado La Paloma, and if you don't know about it, you should, because it's an amazing place to eat and an amazing place to see stuff. And we had an exhibit on immigrant rights there. And that exhibit is actually going to Mount St. Mary's College in the fall, this fall, so it's still going to be in LA, but then it's going to New Jersey next year. So the exhibits that we do travel, and you name the theme, the only exhibit we haven't done yet is on healthcare, and it's because we don't have enough posters, so we need to get posters on healthcare. We need to make posters on healthcare. But we've done stuff on women's rights, on the Black Panther Party, on the United Farm Workers. So there's a whole, we've had 36 exhibits that travel, I don't know how many that don't travel. So those two aspects, the traveling exhibitions and the research, is really what our goal is, what our mission is. I first met Shifra in the 1970s. We were both grad students at UCLA, but I didn't become close with her until the 1980s, and that was during she was one of the founders in LA of Artists Call Against U.S. Intervention in Central America. And enough of you know her, you'll know what I mean when I say you didn't say no to Shifra. When Shifra got an idea, good luck. And she wanted me to participate in one of the many panels she was organizing And so I did, and she talked John Baldessari into designing a poster, which he did, and I think we have it somewhere that you can we have it around for sale. And so that was really when I started really knowing Shifra on more than just graduate students passing in the hall. And she was actually just finishing when I was just starting. And we became very good friends. I don't know when she became my mentor, but she was such a visionary in the importance of art and politics. And art was always political, and politics always used the art to convey the messages. That she really strengthened my understanding of art and politics. And she was actually the very first recipient. In 1996, the center started giving achievement awards. And Shifra was our very first recipient of the Historian of the Lions. And that comes from a quote that says, "Until the lions have their historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter." And not only was Shifra a lion among historians, but the posters are obviously the stories of the lions. And the other thing that Shifra did, whenever I had an article, I would give it to her to read, and she always found the fatal flaw. Unfortunately, I gave it to her before I submitted it, so I had the opportunity to make the corrections. But she also donated to us, while she was still alive, the majority of her astounding political poster, Chicano poster collection, silk screens, prints, just extraordinary stuff. And she said, some of the stuff I'm not ready to give up, but eventually you'll get it. And the eventually came sooner than we all would have been comfortable with, but it did come, and we got the rest of her incredible collection that we exhibit, that people come and research, and you're all welcome to come to our center another time and see. Right now, I have a couple people I want to thank. I want to, of course, thank Eric Garcia and Tricia Dexter, her son and daughter-in-law, who've really been stalwarts throughout all of the above. I mean, I can't thank you enough. And also, we'll hear Eric perform later. He's an extraordinary musician. Gave Shifra a lot of pleasure. And Chon, Noriega, and Charlene Villaseñor Black, who we will be hearing. But I also want to thank Rebecca Epstein, who's not here, but she did a lot to coordinate this event. And I also want to thank the Center's Getty interns, Sam Camarena and Taylor Litonua, who are help us do everything. The Getty is fabulous in giving us interns. And I think there's a couple of CSBG board members here. Kay Gallen, just put your hand up, and Ted Hajar in the red shirt. And there's food in the back, so during the break, during the reception, help yourself to food, wine, and drink. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Chon Noriega, who, by the way, is going to be receiving in October the Center's 2015 Culture of Liberation Award. Gotta give that plug.
Thank you, Carol. It's such a pleasure to be here at the Center, but to also be part of this program through the Center and recognizing Shifra Goldman and the intellectual contributions that she made to Chicano art. And what I was going to do is just read some excerpts from the foreword to the book that was edited by Charlene. And I'm going to take out all the good and interesting stuff so that you'll be inclined to get the book. But hopefully what I do say will give a sense of what I think is her place in the field, not as an abstraction, not as an intellectual effort, but kind of real and on the ground. And we're delighted to partner with the Center for the Study of Political Graphics. Through a quirk of fate and family, I ended up with several thousand posters from Poland in the early 1980s, and they're here, and I'm really proud that my sister's work in gathering this material in Poland at a very vital time in kind of graphic arts creativity. And it was preserved before it became toilet paper. She literally would go and buy crated stacks of posters that were slated to be recycled. So, and it's an amazing work as well. So I want to start, and I think everybody does this, but with my first memory of Shifra Goldman. And it's of the two of us standing in the parking lot of Self-Help Graphics and Art one evening in the fall of 1997. I don't even remember the event that had taken place, only that we engaged in a spirited and sometimes heated debate about art and politics that lasted for an hour or so until our two cars were the only ones that remained. I had met Shifra years earlier through my mentor, Tomasi Barafrausto, and they had been collaborators around Chicano art. But the discussion was the first time in which we had had a chance to kick the tires, as it were. For me, as a junior scholar with a curiosity, but no training about Chicano art, it was a significant encounter with not only a foundational figure in the study of Chicano, Latino, and Latin American art history, but also someone with extensive and hard-won credentials in the social justice movements of the 20th century. And so, what I find is paradoxical, and I have this love-hate relationship with art history. I love it, they hate me. It's a very difficult field in terms of bringing in certain kinds of issues and certain types of communities into the discussion. Because it's a field that, while in part of the humanities, it's very marginalized in many ways, it is the field that takes upon itself the mantle of status and distinction, as one would expect in terms of fine arts. And so you have this kind of grind, as it were, in the same way that Spanish departments often don't hire Mexican Americans and build alliances with the community that surrounds them. They think about Spain in the 1890s. So the irony is, this is me, I'm already an assistant professor, I'm beginning to work in the arts, and my initiation into art history is starting not in an academic department, an archive, or museum, but in the parking lot of a community-based arts organization in East LA, arguing with a larger-than-life Jewish woman about surrealism. And I thought, I'll take it. That I will have that as my certificate, because I don't have a degree in art history. Now, I'll spare you what we talked about, because you can read that in the book, soon to be optioned as a movie. We covered a lot of ground. But what I remember most is that while there was little common ground between us, Shifra never failed to acknowledge the intellectual frameworks from which I was arguing with her. Hers was not a politics of dogma and consensus, but rather one of debate and difference. If you couldn't argue, what was there to talk about? In the end, Shifra and I agreed to disagree productively. And with some degree of compassion, we called it a night since we were both quite tired, and we got into our cars smiling. Now, looking ahead 18 years, it's an honor to be able to publish this book. When Shifra came to me and said the family was interested in having her work that hasn't been gathered into books published, and that this was one that really needed a home, and it just made perfect sense for us. And I think what's particularly important is that these essays really provide something that's missing in the field. You have a growing number of people looking at the artwork, writing about it, curating it, but the intellectual foundation is really at a turning point. Some of the people in this room who are graduate students in art history actually will be the ones that really fully bring the study of Chicano art into, one hopes, into an art history institutional framework. We've been actually, oddly enough, done better in museums. So what I wanted to just, in kind of beginning to wrap up, and when an academic says that, that means about 30 minutes, is to just acknowledge that, as a kind of first wave of scholars writing about Chicano art, Shifra was really contributing what she and others would call the Cultural Reclamation Project, which had broad and systemic features. It wasn't just about articles that were being written. It was about bibliographic work, archival work, and it was also about exhibition, getting the work seen. And this was all done with the idea of really making both a disciplinary and a political change. And again, this is not about the battle of ideas in an abstract sense in which we're all equal and we all have access to the same institution and we can disagree and that makes thought proceed. This is, we got to get the door open. We have to make sure people are in their works in archives, their papers are available. And I think what's notable about Shifra and my mentor as well, Tomás Ibarra-Frausto, is they were doing it all. They realized it's not happening on all fronts. We're the only ones in here. We have to do all of these things. And it's a notable feature, I think, of the cultural side of the Chicano art movement. That the filmmakers weren't just the filmmakers. Sometimes they were the actors, they were the writers, they were the distributors, and then they wrote a review of the film they just made, because no one else would do it. And that's where we have to go back and say that is not a mistake. That is the beginning of the intellectual foundation, and we have to build on it. Don't have to always agree with it, but we have to build on it. Now, in the absence of these, as I mentioned, library and archival holdings in the academy, Shifra's personal research collection became the default archive for both Chicano Latino art and Latin American art. Now, these are two fields that haven't had a lot of love for each other, but they did with Shifra. She knew how they connected. And she would offer her correspondence, publications, museum catalogs, slides, extensive exhibition-related ephemera. I've always been surprised. I talked to someone like Mari Carmen Ramirez, who is one of the preeminent curators and scholars of Latin American art. I said, oh yeah, I'm coming into LA, but first I have to stop at Shifra and spend some time with the archive and have lunch with her. So this is just, you had to do this if you were really going to have a credible foundation in both of these fields. Now, today these papers are archived at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and they provide an invaluable resource for future generation. And my mentor, Tomás's papers are archived at the Smithsonian. So they're in well-located places, accessible, in a way as a way of stimulating future scholarship. But what's, I think, important to remember here is that Shifra's collection was based not just on artifacts, but also on her close and attentive ongoing relationships with the artist. And we've lost that. We've lost a large part of that with her passing. And I think we have to really appreciate that role and how those of us who are just starting or in the midst of our career can play that role, which is she didn't just have a lot of things that you could go look at and write something about an artist or an artwork. She was the oracle in the archive. It was important to speak to her as well and to understand the social dimensions of the artistic practice or the artistic field that was taking place. And that's an element, I think, where those of us that follow in her footsteps, that carry on that work, really have to be thoughtful about this, that we're not just there to produce something. We're not just there to get a show up, to add another line to our resume. There is a social and ethical dimension in how we interact with the people that we're studying, and with the artworks, and with the objects and the documents that we're drawing upon. And our first job, of course, is to make something powerful from it, to make an argument, to argue with other people, to get the work into the discussion taking place that defines what the arts are. But the second has to follow right after that. Make sure it's still around after you're dead. Save it, make a copy of it, make sure that it is archived and that people know where it is. So it's that model that I encountered. I had an argument in a parking lot in East LA. That sounds pretty familiar in a stereotypical sense. But I also had the fortune of acquiring an ethos about how to proceed in the world with the role models that were there and who had some 20 years earlier begun laying a groundwork so that future generations could come in and disprove everything they said. That's the best that they could do, is to create an environment for argument. So I just want to end with a phrase that Mari Carmen Ramirez writes in the book. She does a little personal tribute, which is she identified Shifra as an innate warrior. And those of us that are participating in this, that are trying to bring this into institutional settings, that would just as easily prefer that it not be brought in. You understand the necessity of that kind of position, to understand yourself as an innate warrior, that it doesn't mean you have to be nasty or you have to always be fighting with people, but you are trying to change things, and most people don't like change. And what is, I think, really, exemplary here is the vision that Shifra and the other members of her generation that really opened this area up, several areas in fact, brought to how they were going to participate and how they were going to blur those boundaries that would otherwise, you'd say, well, that's a librarian should be doing that, an archivist should be doing that, a curator should be doing that. But they're not. And so then what do you do? Now, with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Charlene Villaseñor Black. And as Carol had mentioned a few things in the future about me, I'm going to note that in the fall, I'm on sabbatical as director of the Chicano Studies Research Center. I've tried this twice before. It never quite took. Kind of like that Seinfeld thing where the shower didn't take. I got a little bit of a break, but not enough of one. But Charlene is going to be stepping in as the interim director. And damn it, it's going to take this time because she is one of the hardest working people I know. And she's already organizing a conference for us that will be in September, mid-September, on the child migration crises. And so think about that. An art historian stepping in and doing something that we didn't really have anybody else that could do this. We're doing a really up-to-date conference on the legal and the political issues defining this right now, and we'll be hearing from people that are on the ground, overwhelmed with trying to attend to the rights and the kind of human needs of the children, as well as those who are trying to shift the legal and the policy framework that produces a lot of this crisis. So with that, I'd like to introduce Charlene to come up and give the lecture part of the evening.
Thank you. Thank you to the Center for the Study of Political Graphics and the Chicano Studies Research Center, and to Shifra's family. I'm really happy to be here to present on her book. And could I have the next image? Thank you. Published by the CSRC Press and the University of Washington, a really important collection of 11 really foundational essays by Goldman that I edited. And this evening I'll talk very briefly about the book, but also about Shifra Goldman's legacy. So why was it important to publish this collection of essays? Before her final illness, Goldman had been engaged in putting together a last book, an anthology of her essays. She eventually became too ill to finish that. So it was really her wish that this work be made more widely available. And I think this was especially important given the lack of attention directed at Chicano art by the mainstream art world. Many of her previously published essays were not widely available. They had been written, some of them for small exhibitions that attracted mainly local audiences. One of the essays is published here for the first time. So this book really aims at broadening the audience for her scholarship and for Chicano art. And in many cases, the essays constitute still the most comprehensive work done to date on a particular artist or series. So they're very useful in the classroom, and I look forward to using this. It's also well illustrated, 17 black and white figures, and then 16 color plates. And we actually commissioned many new photographs when we could. In addition, it has a section of memorial tributes to Goldman, authored by major voices, art historians, curators, Chicano studies scholars, and of course the foreword by Chon Noriega. And then I added a comprehensive biography of her, and that includes, could I have the next? This photograph of her, this great image of her from 1959 from the Los Angeles Examiner. It's a photograph taken after she appeared before the House Un-American Activities in California Committee that was here in LA, where she refused to cooperate. And it was actually one of two photographs taken of her that were on the front page of the newspaper, and I don't believe they had been republished since then. And I understand it was an event that she didn't speak about until 1992 at the urging of Carol Wells. And I'll show you the next image. So I think this was taken right before, right? This is her coming out smiling in triumph. I didn't cooperate with them. And I love, she's wearing a pinstripe suit and she has gloves. She has white gloves there. Just loved that we can include one of these. Can I have the next? I divided the book into two sections, a section on theory and a section on practice. The theory section includes major contributions to our understanding of the development of Chicano art. Could I have the next, please? There's a history of the exhibition of Chicano art from community-sponsored shows and alternative exhibitions to its inclusion in museums, galleries, private collections beginning in the 80s, and of course the landmark Cara show. Here, there's a new contribution there on Rascuache. Could I have the next? There's an early important piece on border art, and there's a foundational essay on art in the AIDS crisis written in 1994 that documents work by gay and lesbian artists in Mexico and the US Southwest in the 80s and 90s. So it's really important archival work that she did. And finally, this first section includes an unpublished essay on Chicano artists' influence on neo-Mexicanism in Mexico in the 80s. She makes a really bold claim about Chicano artists influencing people in Mexico, and she backs it up with really careful documentation. So I'm really happy that this essay has been published. Can I have the next? The second part is on practice, and it includes major monographic studies of 7 major artists. For example, essay on 2 really important muralists from the 70s, Leo Tanguma here, and this is one of the new images. And the next, please, Emilio Vasquez, and their articulation of what Goldman calls alternative histories in their murals. And could I have the next? Thank you. Another major piece on Luis Jimenez, a significant assessment of his career from the 60s to the 90s, his monumental public sculptures, but also prints and drawings. Can I have the next? Including a really biting critique of his sexualized representations of women. And this is one of my favorite essays here. She was not going to put aside her feminism, not even for Luis Jimenez. So she really talks about these works, and could I have the next two? These 2 lithographs that are less well known, but the analysis of these is just brilliant. Could I have the next, please? There's an important consideration of the career of John Valadez, his Broadway mural, but also his drawings, oil paintings, pastels, and a personal scrapbook that he kept from 1979 until 1989. And the next, please. 2 essays on really important Chicana artists showing how feminism can transform artistic practice. An essay on Santa Barraza, a really major monographic assessment of her work, and reproducing a work that's now in a private collection from the 70s. This is it. And next, please. And then a wonderful essay on Robert Carrasco, who's here this evening. An in-depth focus on a series of miniature artworks, Here Lies, Here Lies. One of the only in-depth pieces that I know of written about this series of pen and ink drawings from 1988 of contemporary personalities of heroes and villains, and this is one of the heroes here that she gave us for the book to publish. And could I have the next, please? And then the second part of the book concludes with an essay on Enrique Chagoya, whose work she analyzes in the context of postmodernism. She singles out 4 major themes in his work up until 1998. And could I have the next? So it's, I think, a really important book. It has great chronological range, variety of media, murals, posters, sculpture, drawing, photography, performance art, video installation, but everything unified by her perceptive visual analysis, her deep historical documentary work, and her commitment to her politics. It's really an inspirational collection. And to end on a more personal note, as I worked on the collection, I thought deeply about Shifra and about my relationship with her and her work. And I learned about her first from her scholarship when I was in grad school at the University of Michigan studying the history of art, when I first saw the Cara catalog. And I remember sitting in my carrel in Tappan Hall and poring over this catalog going, wow, I can't believe this has happened in California. And could I have the next? And I wanted to show you these two images. These are from the opening. They were provided by Professor Cecilia Klein, my colleague here. And it shows Shifra and Cecilia arms up in triumph at the opening of the Cara show in 1990. And that's a detail on the left and the larger image on the right. And in fact, I first met Shifra Goldman at Cecilia Klein's house in Studio City in 1998. And we became friends. I had arrived at UCLA as a postdoc, and I was later hired as a regular tenure-track faculty member. And Shifra shared her archive with me, and we met over dinner, and we met up on campus and talked on the phone, and she mentored my students and mentored me, and for that I'm very grateful. But let me circle back to the title of my brief little talk today about her legacy. She was a pioneer, a founder in two fields, in Chicano art history, but also contemporary Mexican, one could even argue Latin American art history. And her intellectual contributions have been so important. Could I have the next? She's the person who in 1968 rediscovered America Tropical by Siqueiros, now conserved by the Getty and now visible there for all of us. Could I have the next? Her 1977 dissertation on contemporary Mexican art, I think possibly the first on the topic here in the United States, published in 1981, Contemporary Mexican Painting in a Time of Change, still a fundamental text. And could I have the next? Of course, her involvement with the Cara show. And the next. Work she compiled and published with Tomás Ibarra Frausto in 1985, still absolutely foundational for the study of Chicano art. And the next, please. And then her Dimensions of the Americas, published in 1994. And I want to tell you, I just recommended the introduction to a student in the fall quarter who wanted to know, well, how do I do social art history? I don't really understand. I was like, oh, this is the best thing you'll ever read on social art history. And so that introduction we're still using and referring to. And putting this together caused me to think about how far we've come since her path-breaking efforts. It's been 25 years since the Cara show, 25 years. In 2011, the year of her passing, during Pacific Standard Time, this massive initiative of the Getty, there were 6 shows on Chicano art. We're getting ready for PST2 in 2017. There'll be even more shows with all these great curators, especially Chon Noriega, who's here, but other people also coming up. And there are many more people studying Latino and Latin American art now. And the statistics on who's studying these fields were just recently published by Professor Adriana Zavala of Tufts in the spring edition of the journal Aztlán. And she tracked dissertations from 2002 until 2012, 38 in progress on Latino art during that time, 75 on Latin American art. So we've come really far since that 1977 dissertation. And then this year at the College Art Association annual meeting, there was a meeting of art historians putting together a new affiliated association of scholars who work in Latino art, including Rose, who's here, was one of the people. And there's even a Chicana on the board of CAA now, Connie Cortez, who was a UCLA grad and a student of Cecilia Klein. So I'm going to close today with a personal anecdote. I was recently with the artist Sergio Vázquez, who's here, and filmmaker Roberto Origel, also here. We were in discussion about Vázquez's artworks and about a possible film project on Chicano art, the brainchild of Roberto. It had been a really intense afternoon. We've been intensely looking at painting after painting, like moving from storage to his house. In intense and powerful conversation that was sometimes kind of playful and imaginative, but really intense. And late in the afternoon, Sergio looked at me and said, "You remind me of Shifra." It's like she's sitting here with me. It's like I'm talking with her. And I was taken aback. I was like silenced at that moment and humbled by the compliment, humbled by the thought that I could help continue her work. That all of us here tonight, by our presence, by our activism, by our continued scholarship and our art making, continue her legacy. Could I have the final image? And I think that's her most important contribution, her inspiration to us to continue her struggle and our struggle. Thank you. So now Eric Garcia, Shifra's son, is going to, who's a very famous guitarist, is going to play a few songs for us. And then when we're done, we'd like to invite people to come up and reminisce about Shifra. But I'm going to turn over the mic to the real performer here.
I'm going to play a medley of 3 songs. The first one was something that she told me when I was young, and she said I would have to find peace from within myself because it's been a rocky road. And then I'm going to go into a song I wrote recently called Frida and Diego. And then I'm going to finish with a song that the president just sang.
Thank you. It was so beautiful. And the perfect way, I think, to segue into some perhaps personal reminiscences that people might want to share. I know that my colleague Cecilia Klein had something she wanted to say, and I believe Ian, Shifra's grandson, had something. Who would like to be? Would you like to come up, Cecilia? Okay. You can say no too.
For you, those of you who don't know me, I taught pre-Columbian art history at UCLA for 36 years until retiring 3 or 4 years ago. And when I came to UCLA, which was way back in 1976, it didn't take me long to start to realize that history was being made in this city, right in UCLA's backyard. And academia was paying absolutely no attention to it whatsoever. So I carried this beef around with me to a party at David Kunzel's house, where I met Shifra Goldman. And improbable a pair as we may seem, we bonded over this. She had recently received her doctorate, and she had no clout at that university. But I did have some, because I was periodically department chair, and I had a big mouth. So we plotted, and it's a story that really has never been told, so I'm going to sum it up for you as quickly as I can. But it gives you insight into how amazing this woman really was. We decided that the best way to go, after I failed to get my department to hire her, was that we would manipulate the appointment of the new director of the White Gallery on campus in order to get somebody that we knew would curate an exhibition of Chicano art. So I got myself put on the search committee for this director, and every candidate that came through, I asked them, if you were hired, would you be interested in such an exhibition? 2 people said yes out of the maybe 6 people we talked to. One of them, the university flatly refused to have anything to do with because he was too Marxist. The other one was a very petite, sweet young woman named Edith Tonelli. And Edith seemed genuinely interested in the project, so we got her hired. And shortly after she came to UCLA, Shifra and I had a little dinner party for Edith. And we talked to her about how this show might develop and how we would shape it the way we wanted it. More to the point, the way Shifra wanted it. She had the expertise, I didn't have that. But in the process, we not only managed to get this project going, but we got some of our own grad students involved in it, and I got the university to agree to bring Victor Sorella from the University of Chicago to teach Chicano art here for 2 quarters. And we tried to get the university to hire him. Unfortunately, it didn't go through. But in the course of those 2 quarters, Victor had a profound influence on some of the students in our department. And one of them, as Charlene mentioned, was Connie Cortez, who teaches Chicano art now at the University of Texas, Lubbock. So when you see Shifra holding her hand up, it's because that show would not have taken place without her. And I don't think she's ever really had the credit that she deserves for having seen to it that happened. That's just what I wanted to say.
Who would like to speak next? Anyone?
Oh, gee.
Yes, please, please.
Yeah.
Please,
We
of course.
We got too quiet. Shifra wouldn't like it. Quiet is not her long suit. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Rosenthal, and you know, fate works in strange ways. I met Shifra's family at the dog park. And I had just gotten my bachelor's degree in social work, and her daughter-in-law asked me if I knew somebody who could help her mother-in-law out, who had just gotten through with some serious surgery, and she needed help. And I had my summer free because I was done, and I was looking for some work. And I said, well, let me meet her and let's see if we hit it off. And she took me to meet Shifra. We became such good friends. I cannot begin to tell you what a joy it was that this woman came into my life. She taught me things that no school could have taught me. And I grew to love her dearly. And when the time came that she was not able to put this book together, her other books had been done, and she said to me, I need somebody to go to Kinko's and copy I've got all these essays here, and somebody's got to sit down in front of those copy machines and make this stuff. For 2 months, I was at Kinko's. I made the mistake of starting to read them. And I would stop in the middle and start to cry because Shifra didn't just write stuff. Shifra wrote from her heart. Shifra wrote what she felt. And you felt it when you read it. And if you've ever read anything that Shifra has written, you knew what she was feeling when she wrote it. That's a talent that not everybody has. As Shifra became more ill and unable to be Shifra anymore, and she was in a care facility, I would go to see her, and every day Eric would be there with his guitar playing for his mother. There were times when she didn't even know who he was, but she loved the music. And she knew that she loved what was happening, and she was full of that. That fire that she had was her love for life. And everybody who touched her touched that energy that she had. And the time and the years that I worked for her, I would pick up the phone and these amazing artists would be at the other end, and I was like so in awe of who was calling her. And she would have these little parties at the house, and she would set out the same kind of stuff that's Shifra. I tried to help her cook, but no, it wasn't happening. She was not adept at cooking, but she loved to eat, and she loved people, and she loved life, and she loved her causes, and she was all about that, and she adored her family. And she would be so proud today to see her grandson Ian here, this big handsome kid, and her wonderful daughter-in-law and her wonderful son. I'm just saying, she was for real. She was the stuff. And I was just blessed to know her. And she gave not only me, but everybody who touched her life something that they'll never forget. So thank you, Shifra. Thank you, Shifra. And thank you.
Would you like me? Yeah, come on up, please. Yes. You had the perfect introduction.
So I guess I should start by saying that the Shifra Goldman I knew is probably not the exact same person that everybody here knows. Because the thing about her was, for me, I suppose she actually tried to be a grandmother, which I know that many of you would find very uncharacteristic of her. And she was a very good grandmother. I have some of my fondest memories of her. But sadly, she started developing her illness when I was only around 8 years old, so I didn't really get much of a chance to know the real Shifra. And I didn't actually discover how much I really liked history until I was around 12, and by that point it was kind of difficult for me to engage in the kind of conversations with her I really would have liked to. So for the most part, most of what I know about who my grandmother really was, it comes from everyone around me. And from what I can tell, everybody seems to think we share a lot of commonalities. I definitely am passionate about history. I discovered how much I liked it, and it's sort of a secondary passion of mine after physics and stuff. Yeah, it's another thing but at this point it started to become clear to me that Shifra and I might not be the exact same person. I mean, after all, she was terrible at math, which is something I can't exactly sympathize with. She was very brash and bullheaded, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely not something I have. I mean, if I were to be put in some of the positions she was, and try to say some of the things she did, I'm pretty sure I might have an anxiety attack. But in a sense, this actually is kind of comforting because it's nice to know that somebody in my family, and especially someone so closely related to me, was able to pull some of these things off that I could never have done. Quite frankly, for the most part, I'm terrified of politics. I don't think I'm courageous enough to get into that field of study. But she's one of the biggest reasons I have so much respect for my family, and I love and all the stories I've heard about her crack a smile on my face and just make me really happy that I'm so closely related to someone like Shifra. Again, she's the Shifra I knew was a vastly different person than the one you knew. And I remember my mom telling me that she would go on and on and on about, oh my God, I can't wait until he's 12 so I can actually have some real conversations with him. Wow. And I'm very disappointed I didn't get a chance to meet that person, but I guess I'm glad that I get to know the community she was part of and get filled in on all the different things that were great about her. And I will end up reading, and I almost will certainly end up reading her book. But is that something I shouldn't have said? But anyway, I'm really glad to be a part. I'm really glad to be a part of this community, and I'm really glad to call myself Shifra's grandson, because clearly she was really something special.
Anyone else? Yes, please come up.
It may be that Lenny and I knew her best. She was a very interesting character. And I remember when she was about 35 or 36, she said, I think I could be something in life. She was a bookkeeper that couldn't do math. And she said, I want to go back to school because I think there's something for me to do. But it's going to be very difficult because I'm going to have to work a full-time job and go to school at night. And I think subsequent to that, in a weird way, I gave up my mom so that she could pursue this thing, because she worked harder than anybody I knew. And when we went to pull out all her materials to go to Santa Barbara, it was a little unbelievable, the depth of things she had written, that she collected, what she had done. I sort of got to see the depth of her life and her work, because that's all she did was work. I mean, she socialized a little bit, but I think her true passion was in this short lifetime that she had to accomplish and learn as much and write as much and be involved in that. So you would get, I'd love to talk to you, but I'm writing, I'll talk to you later. But one of my memories, we liked to go to art galleries and look at art. And the way we looked at art was completely different. For her, it was a really analytical thing, and for me, it was just how did things affect me emotionally. So we'd go to County Art Museum, and we would separate, and we'd walk through, and 45 minutes later, she would emerge, because I would just basically walk through and look at what turned me on, and just let it sort of flow over me. And then afterwards, we would walk through again and talk about the pieces that we liked. But then I could get all of that analysis and all of that history that I didn't know, because really for me it was just purely emotional. And so, that in a sense was the two of us. I liked music because it's now, when I play earlier, it's just me holding the thought of her and playing my mom. And it's not about the notes, and none of it's left. It's in the ethos now, it's in your hearts, it lives with us, but it's gone. And her thing was about history, things that stay. And we like to talk about all kinds of things, and we would sit, and I didn't know much about history, and she would inform me about history. And the really odd thing is then I had a son named Ian, who sort of became the next generation of her. So I would go with her, and she would educate me. And now I go with my son, and I can ask him questions, and I can get that second education. So in a weird way, although it is not the incarnation, I see that so much of those genes in a weird way sort of skipped me and went straight into him. And it is true, she was so looking forward to teaching him history and teaching him art and taking to galleries and doing all the things that she did with me. But it would have been a much more profound situation, because it would have been a two-way conversation instead of just me going, Anyway, she was an amazing woman, a very tough woman if you knew her. She had no diplomacy at all, and she pissed off many people. But I have two friends that live their life with this manifesto. I think my mom made a manifesto, and I have a friend, and we see how their careers may have suffered, but their reputations maybe didn't. She would always tell the truth. And I don't see how anyone living in Los Angeles can live their lives and tell the truth. But that's what she did. I'm a mixer, I do commercials. I can't tell the truth at all, ever. So I was grateful for that. Our personalities, I thought, were really different. She was loud and extroverted and opinionated, and I was this incredibly shy, introverted person. But during the period when she contracted Alzheimer's, and we spent a lot of time together, and I watched the process of, I called it the Sherman tank. She had always been like me. She had been sensitive and delicate, but in order for a powerful woman to exist in the world, she built a Sherman tank around her to protect herself, and she became this persona. But I began to see, as she couldn't anymore support the weight of the Sherman tank, underneath was that same person. Because I'd always say, how did I come from her? This delicate, sensitive, emotional, but I saw really under there was that same person. But life was such, and she always said, I was born at the wrong time. I should have been born now, where women would be accepted. She had issues with men that would never accept her. She was very, very powerful. And she just felt that was the situation. And in the process of her getting sick and breaking down, I began to rediscover that person that I never knew. Because by the time I knew her, she was a single mother, not able to earn a great living, sort of fighting the world. And I got to visit her again. And I didn't really play acoustic guitar. It was not part of my thing. I was an electric guitar player. But I discovered that I could go and play the songs that she and Lenny and all these people played when I was growing up. if I played those to her, it would make her smile and go to sleep. So I would go and play protest songs and Dylan songs and things like that, and it made her really happy. And it became, once she lost her ability to actually speak, and she sort of went into her subconscious that we had that, and that I could kiss her, and I could kiss her and I could make her happy. So I would go every morning before work and go play to her. And as a result, I discovered the acoustic guitar, and have subsequently, in 5 years, developed a touch for the instrument and have recorded a number of albums. The first album I put out was called Songs for Shifra, of these songs that I played for her. So in a weird way, she gave me gifts of the knowledge of politics, the knowledge of art. She turned me on to Fellini. She introduced me to Salvador Dali, the films of Luis Buñuel, all of this stuff that I got from her. And then in the end, unbeknownst to her, she turned me on to the acoustic guitar and all the things that it could do. And now it's a very important part of my life. So it's an additional gift that she gave me. I can't believe she's gone. It's just still tears me up, because there was so much more to do, but I guess that's just the way it is. And thank you so much for being here.
Anyone else? Come on. Okay. Yes.
Somebody else want? Oh, no, you go.
Okay.
I'm Gloria Nerina Alvarez, poet, playwright. Shifra was just, oh my God, so amazing. I think I met her in the 70s, like the late 70s. And Shifra was always present. She was always there. I wanted to thank you, Chon, for mentioning the relationships that she had with the artists. It was such a gift to visit Shifra. We were neighbors. We lived, she lived in Echo Park, and then both of us moved to Silver Lake, and pretty close to each other. And I think one of the, apart from, the activism and the art, part of, I think, what brought us closer was the fact that we were both, we had been single mothers, and I had a chance to travel with Shifra a couple of times, and that was just incredible. It was just magical being around Shifra, and being able to share, to learn so much from her, not only what she did as an art historian professionally, but on a personal level also. That commitment, she really gave me the support and love. She was like that favorite tia, who would tell you, who would just tell you like it is, and that was Shifra. Shifra Goldman. Presente. I kind of control myself in the early part, and I have way more stories than we all have time for now. But I want to tell one that we've all talked a lot and heard a lot about her strength and her power and her fearlessness. But I interviewed her for a Lifetime Achievement Award in '92, and I found that she definitely had a profound fear. And that fear was that people would find out that she had been a member of the Communist Party, that she'd been called before HUAC. I was really, that those photos were amazing. But she said, I'm telling you because I trust you, but you cannot tell anyone else. And I argued with her. And the reason she did, I mean, here she was, she hadn't yet retired, but certainly she had a reputation. I mean, she was internationally renowned scholar. She published a lot of books. This was in the 90s. And I said, why? She said she'd lost her first job because of that. She'd been persecuted to the point of HUAC because of that. And she just still, as many of that generation did, still carried that fear. Still carried that fear of the tide changing, of being persecuted, of being discriminated against and punished, if not imprisoned or exiled, because of her commitment and her membership in the Communist Party. And then she started telling me things that she did. In the 50s, she was a student at UCLA. And the late 40s, I forget when she started UCLA, late 40s. And the returning GIs couldn't get, if they were black, they couldn't get their hair cut by the Westwood barbers. So Shifra and other students who were members of some communist youth group at UCLA organized a boycott of the Westwood barbers. So they would cut, if you don't cut the hair of the GIs, then nobody will go. And this was the kind of thing she did with complete, it seems now, fearlessness. But after that interview that I did with her in 92, she did it in spite of her fears. So to be fearless is not being without fear. And I think if we refer to Shifra as fearless, it's not quite accurate. She acted fearless. But I think her commitment to justice made her, probably on a daily basis, overcome her fears every time she saw injustice being done. And for that, we're all the better for that. Thank you.
Well, it's really, at Shifra's Memorial, we got a little emotional during that time. Several of us who were really close to her. She mentored so many women that are in this room, Sybil Venegas and Gloria, of course, and Irena Cervantes. But I want to talk about Shifra's love for the Latino and Chicano male. This is a really weird story. We were at Barnesdall one time, and I knew that she admired the work of Oscar, right? But she says she sees I just started seeing Harry Gamboa, my husband, almost 30 years. But she looks at Harry and she goes, this is how much she liked him. She goes, oh my God, you look just like Rudolph Valentino. And then I was thinking, he's good looking, but he's not Rudolph Valentino. And then it was just really weird. But she really liked him so much. But then I didn't see her for a while, and then I saw her at another art exhibit. And even though she admired and really respected his work, I couldn't believe this. In an art gallery, she looks at Harry and she said, what are you doing to Barbara? Why is Barbara dressing so differently? Because are you trying to make her into one of those Oscar women? And it was really weird because the Oscar group, they all wore black all the time. I never wore black in my life. But I did started changing. I remember having an army jacket, and then Harry said, if we go to May Company and buy you a new jacket, will you get rid of the army jacket? But anyway, Shifra she just loved Chicano. She loved Magoo, and Marty. Magoo's ex-wife is here. I mean, all the artists. I mean, she had tremendous. It wasn't just a respect for them. She really loved all the artists. That's one thing I wanted to share with everybody. She was present at all the art exhibits. Mm-hmm. She was in poetry readings and any event that was going on in the community. She was a woman who really believed in community, really believed not only in the arts community, the political community. I mean, it was just wonderful to meet someone like her, and someone I thought lived a life of with integrity, which is, kind of dying out nowadays. No, I'm just kidding. I shouldn't say that. Carol, where are you? Don't get mad at me, Carol. But anyway, I just wanted to share that part with you, that she just really admired and loved the artist. We all were really good friends with her. We went to her house all the time. And she opened her doors so that we could look at her archives and then she, you know, every once in a while she'd be writing something and share it with us, and I would say, well, I don't really agree with that. You know, there was like, she wrote something about Carmen Lomas Garza, and a really well-known artist in the Bay Area, and Carmen had been at a women's conference a week before that, and she said something about, you know, during the movement needed us as to do all the posters, to do all the banners, all that. But now that we're getting older, the women, you know, Carmen's older than I am. Anyway, and that they wanted to do images about personal images, experiences as a Chicana growing up, encountering racism and sexism and all that. And then Shifra, in her article she's writing, you know, she says Carmen is turning away from the movement, right? So I go, Shifra, I don't think that's what she meant. I mean, I could see that Carmen, because I have a lot of respect for Carmen, I mean, I could see that she was just going in a different direction. And Shifra was really a really tough lady, really tough. I mean, either did this her way or no way, and it was just funny. And then, but that's why we got along really good, because I had already been fighting City Hall over my mural, and I was. Then she called me scrappy one time. I never even knew what that word meant. High praise. Anyway, yeah, but that was a compliment, and I just wanted to share that we just all love Shifra. Just something. I just want to share that.
Who would like to be next? I see lots of people who I know have fantastic memories. Anyone else like to share? Yes, please.
My name is Ann Isolda, and I'm a member of the Women's Caucus for Art. And we were the organization that gave Shifra her Lifetime Achievement Award in 1993 in Seattle, and Carol Wells was the presenter. So we understood what her life's work was about and how important it was, and we wanted to honor her. Well, we started that tradition in, I think, when Carter was president. It was the first Lifetime Achievement Awards. They gave them in the president's office. And this is something we still do every year at the CAA conference. But she was so deserving. And that's the formal part, the professional part. But I had a personal relationship with Shifra, and I can't remember if it started when I was working on the U.S. Protest of intervention in Central America. I was with a group and we organized a postcard exhibition, and we put it on display at Otis when it was still over near downtown. And then later we did a show of work from Costa Rica by a group called Clima Natal. And we had a beautiful exhibition at Otis in the gallery and a catalog and all that. And Shifra was so supportive of that work. But the main thing was, at some point, I've been involved in revisionist history since 1975. I worked on the Dinner Party Project with Judy Chicago. It's a large sculpture about the history of women's achievement in Western civilization. And my job was to facilitate the research for the heritage floors. 3,000 women we researched over 3 years. And it was amazing that we found out about so many people that no one had ever heard of, including me. And so Shifra, I loved her because she was such a revisionist historian. She was always digging to find out things that other people didn't know and to put a different slant on it. And so I was doing research after the dinner party on Project on Equity in the Arts, which is kind of still going on, and she invited me to come up to her home. And she said, you know, Santa Barbara, all that information is Santa Barbara, but you can come to my library. I have one of the best libraries in Los Angeles on Latin American and Chicano art. So we became fast friends, and I remember taking these drives to Silver Lake and up the hill, you know, around to her house and parking at her car. And she'd always kind of, oh, Ann, it's so good to see you. Come sit for a minute and we'll talk. But then she took me, her library was like a gold mine. I'm telling you, how many people have been in her library or house? You know what I'm talking about, right? And she was so generous. I think I must have gone there 20 times. And she would open her file drawer, oh, this, you've got to look at this, or here's this first book I ever published, or she would tell me what to look at that was important, and then we would talk about it. And she gave me such insights into her love of Latin American art and the Chicano art movement, and we had so many spirited discussions. And that said, I would have to say that I felt that Shifra is one of the most loving people I've ever met, one of the most passionate people I've ever met, an incredible mentor, so generous, so willing to be there and help, and if you loved history, she loved you, you know, kind of thing. So I just feel blessed to have known her and to have been able to spend all those hours in her library. It's really special. Thank you.
I think maybe it's time to move to the reception next door, and we can continue to share and reminisce. But thank you so much for making this possible, and Carol, thank you so much. All right.